Into number.
You are already dead.
It's a trap. I'm sure of it. Into number.
You are already dead.
I think I got it.
It's a trap. I'm sure of it.
It goes like this is only the beginning. Again.
What is going on, everybody? Good afternoon, right? It's not morning time anymore. We just got done covering KBO, and now we're looking forward to some Call of Duty for the rest of the weekend. First of all, we're going to have a 4-game slate, followed by another 4-game slate, which will be tomorrow. And then on Sunday, we should have a 2-game slate. I believe it's the same format as last time, but we also have a special guest here, one of my COD analysts. He has been helping us out for all the COD content. And if you guys remember 2 weekends ago, we absolutely crushed it with the Atlanta phase stack. And we're going to be looking at something similar with our strategy going forward for Call of Duty. We have a little bit of our premium content that we covered on Patreon. Also, guys, let me know if our mic does work here. I got a new headset, so I can't hear everything. It sounds a little different. So just let me know if the mic works. And also, Hyper, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. What
Awesome.
up, bro?
Thanks for showing up and doing this breakdown. So Hyper has been watching Call of Duty for literally, how long, Hyper, have you been watching it for?
At least 10 years for sure.
Yeah, dude, 10 years. So he knows the ins and outs of every single one of these players. I used to tune into Call of Duty back in the day. Also, guys, let me know if you guys can hear Hyper. I believe you should be able to. We're all good? Awesome. Okay. I covered Call of Duty for a while back in the day, but then I kind of stopped watching. But I came back into the scene, and a whole bunch of new players have kind of been back in. I see a couple of players like Clayster still in. Some of these OG guys, some of these Chicago Huntsmen, like we all know Scumpy. But there's some new guys that have entered the scene and quite frankly have just been dominating. So those are the people that Hyper knows, and he's going to be covering a lot of these players. So as far as a DFS perspective, if you guys haven't given my other video a watch, we covered basically how to attack Call of Duty. It's targeting the close matchups, right? Because Call of Duty, it goes in this sequence every single time. It starts with hardpoint, it goes to search, domination, hardpoint, and then search again. We know from a DFS perspective, hardpoint gets the most amount of points. You get 2 points for every kill. You get -1 for every death. You get 0.1 points for every second that you're on the hill. So you want aggressive players that are going to slay, that are going to get a lot of kills. And then you obviously want to target that same kind of mindset in domination. So there's a couple teams that stand out when, like last weekend or 2 weekends ago. I always say last weekend. 2 weekends ago. We targeted Atlanta because of their slaying power, because it was a closer matchup. We get a different kind of mindset for this weekend because if we look at the Vegas odds, and I'm going to confirm this with Hyper, we have closely favored matchups across the board. Okay, so it's really going to be more of a crapshoot when it comes to picking these players. There's Paris Legion, Atlanta FaZe. It's the highest favorite on the slate is Atlanta FaZe, but they're still projected to go over 4 games, a -225 chance, which equates to about 70%. It actually went up a little bit. So Atlanta FaZe and Paris have a 70% chance to go over 3 games. Optic Gaming and London, they have an over of 4.5 games plus 175. So that's also projected to go to 4 games. Toronto, New York Subliners also projected to go 4 games. And then Florida and Minnesota actually has the highest chance of going 5 games. But they have the best chance to go to 4 to 5 games. I guess, Hyper, what's your overview on where these teams are going to sit as far as the competitiveness? Do you think every single game is going to go to 4 or 5 games?
Yeah. This slate's a lot different than the last one because obviously 2 of the top 3 teams aren't playing in Dallas and Chicago. So Atlanta's obviously the clear-cut best team here, but all the rest of these teams are pretty close in skill set.
Right, yeah, we had like a couple teams. I remember last time we had Chicago, which ended up being a bust. We had Dallas and then Atlanta. Those were the strongest teams probably in the league. But now we're looking more of a lopsided affair here as far as talent. I guess Atlanta, you were telling me, is the highest favorite. Do you think they're going to blow out Paris?
It's a possibility, but I still think that they're going to go at least 4 games.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you this. Are there any games like that, if you had to put money on, are going to go to 5 games on this slate?
Definitely Minnesota and Florida. If I had to pick one to go 5, that would be the one I would choose.
Right. And then I know you're high on subliners. What do you think the chances are for the subliners to go 5 games?
I don't see the subliners going 5. I could see them going 4 just because Toronto's a pretty strong search and destroy team, but as far as respawns, I think New York is just in a different class than Toronto.
Yeah, and that's one thing to note because we have Atlanta FaZe, and then it's like, who do you pick after that for objective game types for like headquarters and domination? We know the target the hardpoint dominant teams like Atlanta FaZe, but who would you pick next in line? I guess as far as absolute like out slaying people, getting on hard points, basically the best hard point or domination teams, who would you go for? Who would you target?
After FaZe, it would definitely be Minnesota or New York. I'd probably take Minnesota just because they've been more consistent throughout the season, but New York is also really strong in respawns as well. Since they've added Mac Mel to their roster.
Yeah, we were talking about that in Discord. So we have the new addition to Mac Melts. I'm going to pull up my spreadsheet. I don't know if you have the stream pulled up. But one thing we have to look at, and from a DFS perspective, is stacking teams, because you want a team that is, one, going to be good at hardpoint, but is also going to go to a 4-game series. But if there's a game that doesn't go the distance to 4 or 5 games, anybody in that lineup is going to be pretty much screwed, even if they do well. Like if you have, let's just hypothetically say you start somebody from phase or even stack phase, if all those players end up 3-0ing and they even win their search map and they win in domination, all those players are not going to get fantasy points. They're just not going to get as much. The ceiling isn't going to be as high for somebody that goes 4 or 5 games like Minnesota. So I guess the value, the chalk, where all the percentage ownership is going to be, it's going to be in this closely favored matchup between Florida and Minnesota. Now, if you had to pick, I guess, your most favorite popular plays from that game, who would you go to?
In the whole matchup?
Yeah, so if we're talking about well, I guess if you had to pick a team, who would you pick from Florida or Minnesota?
I would pick Minnesota. They have more individually stronger players than Florida. Mm-hmm. Florida really, as far as DFS goes, Florida really, Pharaoh and Skies are going to be their clear-cut best players by pretty wide margin, I'd say.
Yeah, so we have, if I scroll down to Florida and Minnesota, we're looking at hardpoint KDs from Minnesota. GodRx has a 1.31. This is over the past 5 tourneys. Assault has a 1.21. Alex has a 1.16. To me, from an outside standpoint, it looks like they're pretty dominant for hardpoint. I think a good pivot or a stronger team that we're going to be looking at is going to be Minnesota for sure. I completely agree with you there. And then if we're looking at Florida looks like there's 2, like you said, Skies and Pharaoh. Now, who was the person you said that didn't have that big of a sample size? Was it Pharaoh?
Yeah, it's Pharaoh.
So he has a 1.13. Do you think that he is still, because as far as DraftKings goes, he's actually one of the highest priced guys on the slate. Do you think that's fair to like take him over somebody like Simp?
No, not at all.
Not at all. Okay, so that's funny because the whole Atlanta roster in general is very cheap, and I'm not going to give away anything because this is an open chat. By the way, I saw that question in the chat. Is this a Patreon member only chat? No, this is open to the public. We're just talking about the slate in general. We're not going to give our exact stacks and everything, but Atlanta is relatively cheaper than these guys, and it's funny because they're a higher favorite, and they happen to be the best hardpoint team on the slate, as we mentioned, but they're also cheaper. So to differentiate yourself, yes, Atlanta could be a good team. Players that are on Florida, they are more expensive, and we know this from a DFS perspective. Your most common DFS player is just going to maximize their salary. So leaving a lot of money on the table is definitely okay. I remember me and Hyper were building lineups last weekend, or why do I keep saying that? Two weekends ago. Hyper literally left $6,000 on the slate. He stacked Dallas and Atlanta, and he left $6,000 over, and you cashed easily. So leaving money on the table is completely fine. Completely fine for Call of Duty. More so for Call of Duty for CSGO. Not so much for your NBA, but the question is, would you be okay with leaving money on the table? And the answer to that's going to be yes. It's going to be yes because it not only differentiates yourself, but Atlanta is straight up has the better players. So before we get that question, yes, it's okay to leave money on the table. Also, guys, we have a lot of people tuning in. Just to let you guys know, this is a completely free chat. If you guys haven't already, please hit that subscription button. Please hit that notification bell. Of course, we will be going live before lock, not only for Call of Duty, but for things like CSGO, for KBO, and all the other sports. So we're getting questions now. So let's go ahead and break down some questions. Do you have anything to add? I guess. All right, let me ask you this, Hyper. Before we go into the questions, are there any sneaky stacks that you're going to be looking to target? It looks like, I know you have the ownerships, you have the projections, but if there was somebody that you're looking at that nobody else would take, who would it be?
again, I could see New York, even though they're a good team, they're still an underrated team for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I had to pick one team, I'd pick New York for sure.
Yeah, I was about to say, because New York is literally showing under 14% owned for a lot of their players. I think the hesitation for New York is that all their players are pretty balanced. If you had to pick some players, who would they be from the subliners?
I mean, I've been pretty consistent. I like Mac, Temp, and Zuma just because the way they play the game, they're all super aggressive players. So they're going to, especially in hardpoint, they're going to get in a lot of engagements around the map, which it can be a double-edged sword. They could either go really positive or, depending on how the game's going, really negative. So it's kind of a high-risk, high-reward play. But those are the three players I like on New York.
Now, for the subliners, you said they have a lot of engagements. I guess the role here, because I know for specific maps, there's 3 subs, 2 ARs, could be 4 subs, 1 AR. From a strictly player perspective, what kind of players Mac melts? Because I actually don't know. That's actually a question I have.
He's going to be in your face 24/7, just sprinting at you constantly.
Does he run AR or sub?
He's an SMG player.
Okay, so a lot of engagement, probably not as good as Simp, but he has a lot of engagement. So it looks like Draftkings doesn't know what to do with Mac Melts too, because he actually is he's very cheap. So I like Mac Melts just because he's going to fly under the radar, and like you said, he's always in your face, he's aggressive. I do like Mac Melts, and you said, I'm sorry, Zuma and who else? Temp, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
to put in kind of some perspective on Mac, 2 weekends ago was the first time he played in a tournament, and this guy had 45 kills on a Gunrunner hardpoint, which there's only been like 4 players who have put up 45 plus on a map all season. So just to give you some perspective on how good he can actually play for you.
Right. And it's funny because we always roast their sub player, their actual sub player. It looks like Mac Melts is going to be in the roster for good. You said they were, what, top 4, arguably? They could be after this edition?
Yeah, they have potential to be top 4 right now. I'd say they're probably a top 6 team, despite their ranking.
Yeah, I think they're 2-7 right now.
They started out really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have a question coming in here. Do you like Attach too?
Attach is good. He's inconsistent. I mean, I'm pretty sure you had played him 2 weekends ago. Like, obviously, he has potential to do very well. But as you saw, he had the one, the Friday he played really good.
Yep.
And then Saturday he was kind of nowhere to be found. So, I mean, he's good. He's a good player, depending on what if you're trying to budget or whatnot. But, like I said, I just like the 3 other players more.
Yeah, and he'll be lower owned in general too. Not lower owned. I meant to say he'll be higher owned just because of his recent performance. So if you're talking about just an ownership perspective, I think your players are definitely where the leverage spot's going to be. So we have another question here. When building the lineups, when stacking, are the players who are higher priced always the better players from their team? Yes and no. DraftKings has done a very good job at pricing their players. If you guys have my my projections, it's pretty much in line with the pricing. There's a couple players, like we just said, from individual teams that just don't make sense. Like Simp is priced lower than literally, I'd say, like 6 other players, but he's arguably the best player in the league. So generally the pricing is in par with how good the players are from their individual teams, but as a whole, the pricings are still not there, and it doesn't make sense. And I think that DraftKings really does need to fix their method on how to run this. I think there needs to be point bonuses for sweeps and like League of Legends and things like that. But we're going to keep taking advantage of it. So, I mean, there's a couple teams that just don't make sense as far as their pricing players. Like we saw last two weekends ago, we saw when Dallas got 3-0'd, all their players were more expensive because they were closer in odds, but then Atlanta was the one that ended up going to the 4th game, and they just outscored everybody. So anything can happen. First of all, it's still online. I want to get your opinion on that too after I'm done rambling. It's online. It's still volatile. It's still Call of Duty, so anything can happen. Yes, Attach can go out there, do something, but as far as your general roles, that's what you guys have to stick to. So we just mentioned that there's a couple players that are going to slay. Their consistent roles within the roster, they should do well if their team does well. But as far as like the individual players, yes, there's more consistency for the slayers, for like the Octanes of the world, for the Simps of the world. But the pricing for the teams just don't make sense yet. So because it's online, what are your thoughts on the volatility? I guess how does online come into play when you're talking about a tourney like this? Because we know that the four tourneys before last tourney were all in person. How do you think this will switch up things just because it's online?
I mean, it definitely plays a factor to an extent, but as far as what I mean is it can extend a series. Like typically series that would be played on LAN might go 3-0. These might end up going 4 games, but as far as the actual outcome of the game, I don't think it changes too much. Like for example, just because FaZe is playing online, they're not going to lose the series in a whole to Paris Legion the same way they would on LAN. So as far as the outcome, I don't think it's that much different. I mean, they might play extra 1, maybe 2 maps, but I think the better team is still going to win regardless.
So do you think teams are closer? Like, do you think teams can compete easier because it's online?
In certain situations, yeah. I mean, anytime you're talking about online, it's obviously going to play a factor for sure.
Yeah. We talked about this the other day. So like Atlanta and Dallas, we know that Dallas is a better online team, but like somebody like Atlanta has just come out and dominated in LAN, and it's kind of unfortunate that they have to play online because they're not. It's not that they're not dominant, but they're not as dominant as they were on LAN. So it can definitely affect it for sure. We have a couple more questions. Thoughts on an OG London stack, and that's for you, Hyper.
Honestly, if I had to choose one series that I could see being a lock 3-0, it'd probably be this one. Just because Optics playing, I don't know if you said this, but they're playing with a completely new player this weekend.
Mm-hmm. I did mention that. Yeah.
I haven't got to watch them play, but if we're going based on what they have been all season, they've been the most inconsistent team. They could come out and be really good because their players are super talented, but they've just been really bad. So I personally wouldn't do that, but again, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at strictly hardpoint stats, they don't really compete well with London. Now, I mentioned this on a 2-game slate. Game stacking is definitely viable, but when you're talking about 4 games, there's more of a likelihood that more than one of these games is going to go to 4 or 5 games. So game stacking isn't as viable on the 4-game slate, especially if you're going for a GPP takedown. If you're going for like a cash lineup or just to even cash, yes, that's still viable. But again, it kind of limits your upside. If you're targeting the 2 winning teams and they both happen to go to a 5th game, those are going to probably be the optimal stacks. So just from a strategy perspective, it makes more sense to not game stack on this slate. So possible to fade FaZe is another question, or have a one-off. And I answered this earlier kind of indirectly. So the thing with FaZe is they could go out in 3-0, or they could go out and 3-1, which changes everything. If Paris happens to win the search map, that's kind of what we want if you're playing Atlanta, because if they're going to that 4th map, again, they're one of the best hardpoint teams in the world. Okay, so they're going to go out and get a ton more fantasy points if they go to that best of 4, or they go to that 4th game. So it's risky. It's not too risky. The odds point to a 70% chance of them going to a game 4. Paris has, I think you said, you mentioned this to me, Hyper. Paris was a team that has never gotten swept, right?
Yeah, correct.
So they haven't gotten swept. So take that knowledge. It's online, guys. I mean, I'm not going to say anything, but it's still likely that they will push it to a game 4 or 5. Hopefully for 5 if you guys are playing Atlanta. So next question, GodRx and Captain. Do you like GodRx on this slate?
Oh yeah, for sure. GodRx, obviously he didn't play 2 weekends ago, so not many people know about him that are new to this, but GodRx right now is probably a top 5 player in this game for sure.
Yeah, so you were mentioning before the slate even, but before we even started breaking down the slate, you said GodRx is going to be one of the best players on the slate. So I definitely agree with that. Looking at stats, it definitely makes sense. And if you're looking for a stack with his team, who else would you pair with GodRx?
If you're taking just 2 players, definitely him and Assault.
2 or 3? What's your third
If you're
player?
taking the third player would definitely be Alex for sure.
Alex, okay. All right, and yeah, if you guys could chill with the spam, please listen to our mods. Our mods put a lot of work in. They are constantly monitoring the chat, so please stop spamming the chat, guys. Who's your favorite stack for today? I cannot say that because that is paid content, but I will say that Atlanta, London, subliners, Minnesota, and Florida are all really good stacks today. It really depends on whether they're going to 4 or 5 again. That's DFS for you. You have to kind of predict. You kind of have to guess which teams are going to do that. Okay. You weren't talking about a strict game stack. Okay, so you're going off Wuskins. Yes, Wuskins is still a great play. Wuskins is one of the best players. I think. I think Hyper can confirm this. We haven't talked about London. Do you want to talk about London real quick? Do you like London at all?
Yeah, I like London. I like Wuskin and Scraps from London. Just based on those two, these are the most consistent. Like I've told you, like Dylan is a super good player, but the way he plays, he's like a maniac on the map. So like the way he plays is not consistent. So he could go 40 and 20 and just absolutely fry, or he could go 20 and 40 and nobody would be shocked because the way he plays just isn't that consistent. The other two, Jared, Jared's okay, I guess. As far as a DFS play, I would say no. And I haven't really watched much of Shawnee considering he just joined their team, so I can't really give like an educated opinion on him.
We know this if we're looking at 2 weekends ago. It looks like Scraps and Wuskins were easily the best players, so I think I can agree with you there. I think if you go with a 3 stack, you're being very risky because I don't think London, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think London goes out and just dominates OBJ. Somebody like Atlanta can go out and do that, can dominate in hardpoint. But if like London wins their hardpoints, I feel like it's going to be very volatile as far as their actual player play outside of Wuskins. All right.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of talking about the subliners in that regard, but with outside of Mac Melts, I just feel like any one of those players could step up. Do you hate GodRx? 1 off and captain. We already answered that question. We do like GodRx. I've seen conflicting amongst the DFS world. Is a 3-player stack okay? Yes, it is, especially if you're targeting, if you get the only game, the winner of a best of 5 that goes to game 5, and they happen to win hardpoint, and domination. They only lose the 2 search maps. I can almost guarantee you that 3-man stack is going to be optimal. All right. So like we said, anything can happen here. How do you guys go about picking a team for the team spot? Great question. So you guys will know this, and me and Hyper are kind of confused about this, but subliners, for instance, are the cheapest team in the team spot, but they're also the second heaviest favorite on the slate. I just think that's because Draftkings screwed up. They're going to be very chalky. You're going to want to take a team that's going to win outright. Heavier favorites, the better. You're going to want teams that are going to win in search. So honestly, I wouldn't pay too much attention to the team spot as much as I would the player spots. It's kind of like a shot in the dark. Good teams to target are going to be FaZe, Royal Ravens, subliners, and then lower owned teams are going to be Minnesota or Florida, just because we don't know what the outcome of that game is going to be. Oh boy, it looks like we're getting hate in the chat. Thank you for clearing that up. Anyone in the team spot? Yep, just answered that. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And of course, we will be active in the Discord chat or premium chat and also in the public chat. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to DM me. We're going to give it about 2-3 more minutes and I'll go ahead and close the stream because I personally need to make my own lineups. And I know Hyper has to too. And we'll go ahead and get off after that, guys. Let me know if you have any more questions. Subliners is a good name. Yep. Let me also scroll up to see if I missed any. Who is each of your favorite stacks today? Can't give that info, guys. Sorry. All right, the chat's starting to get a little crazy, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Guys, thank you so much for showing up to the chat, showing up to the stream. If you guys, like I said, if you have any more questions, if you guys are interested in the Patreon, feel free. The links are below to sign up today. Of course, we break down not only Call of Duty, but every single DFS sport out right now. I know we're in a pandemic, it's rough times, so if you guys are looking to play DFS, feel free to sign up today. Of course, we break down every single game. So with all that being said, guys, have a great rest of your weekend. We'll be covering the Call of Duty slate tomorrow and on Sunday as well. So feel free to sign up if you guys need to do that as well. With all that being said, have a great day and let's cash.
Drop.